So this week's Parsha we're talking about is Parshas Noach. Now obviously the big story of Parshas Noach is the flood. And the flood, in addition, when it comes to Torah and learning Torah generally, there are a couple of ways that people could miss a part of the big picture. And this is a general idea. This is not Parshas Noach specifically. So sometimes people can get very, very focused on the text and the literal meaning, which is definitely the lesser of the two sort of mistakes or things that could be missing out in the approach, and to sort of miss a lot of the additional meaning that's in Torah. So Torah, we have the psukim, the verses, we have what they tell us, and the Torah that we have, what we read, what we learn, when we just read the Torah itself, the actual verses, and even the basic commentaries, is the surface layer of an entire universe, and there are infinite layers beneath that of additional meaning. So if someone focuses just on that sort of the front of Torah, the psukim, the verses, the literal meaning, even the most basic commentaries, they could be missing out on a huge body of knowledge, information, and relevant life lessons that lie beneath the surface. Another mistake that's also somewhat common, perhaps in the wider world more common, and a bigger mistake, is to think of Torah as being just a metaphor, only a metaphor. And there are these life lessons and things that we learn that are beneath the surface. And, the whole Torah and what it actually says in the psukim is just a front for what's behind it. And really it's all metaphorical and just metaphorical. And that is absolutely not the case. So there's an expression that says, Ein mikra yotzi midei pshutei. A verse never leaves its simple meaning, pshuto, what it means simply at face value. Yes, there are additional layers of meaning and additional lessons that we can add, but those additional lessons never ever take away what it means, literally. So, and the reason I wasn't even planning to do this, it was a bit of a tangent, but it's important because a lot of times we'll, mention the parasha, talk about the story, and then go into the lesson that we take from it. And I just want to make it very clear that when we say that these are lessons that we're getting from the story in the Parsha, that doesn't mean that the story is just a metaphor and just a front for these lessons. So the big story, obviously, of this week's Parsha, the number one big story, is Noach, the flood, the ark. Now, number one is this story happened. It actually happened the way it's described in the Torah. In addition to that, and what I want to focus on more, but I just wanted to add in that fine print because it's very important to make sure that there's no misunderstanding, that it's just a front and just a metaphor. It is a metaphor, and everything in Torah is a metaphor for multiple things, for countless things, infinite things. That doesn't mean, God forbid, that it's just a metaphor and not literal. Torah is literal. It means exactly what it says. It's also, in addition to that, has additional metaphorical lessons, meanings that it can teach us as well. And generally in this class, that tends to be what we focus on. I just want to make it clear to make sure that there's no misunderstanding, and that when we give metaphors and additional layers of meaning, we're never ever taking away from what it actually says. So one of the big features, obviously, of this week's story of the flood is water, right? A flood is an overabundance, a problematic overabundance of water, in short. And water, in addition to being actual water and being an actual flood, this water is also a metaphor. This water is overwhelming, it's disruptive, right? When people are when someone's drowning, God forbid, there's there's an expression, grasping at straws, right? The expression grasping at straws mean when someone's like completely lost and they're basically about to lose everything, they'll grab at anything even if it has no hope of helping them. Because when a person's drowning in water, God forbid, it would make sense to grab onto some floating wood, to grab onto a raft. If there's a straw floating at the top of the water, grabbing it's not going to help. But when a person gets that desperate and that overwhelmed, they'll grab at anything, even something that's not going to help. So when a person is in water that's too overwhelming, they lose track of everything, they get completely distracted, they grab at things that shouldn't be grabbing at, that are not going to help them. So water represents this idea, this theme of elements that distract, that overwhelm, and that take us away from what we're supposed to be focused on. Now, in this story of the flood of Noach, the Torah tells us, Niftuchu arubos hashamayim, the windows of the heavens opened, and rain came down. V'nifku'u kol mainos hatahom, and the mayonos, the well springs of the great depths of the tahom, nifku'u, split open, and water came up. So there was water coming in from, not both sides, but from two directions, from above and below. There was water coming up from underneath, and there was torrential rain. And the two together combined to cause this flood that basically wiped everything off the face of the earth except for that which was in Noach's ark, in the Teva. And if we're looking at these water as being this theme of things in life that distract us, that take us away from what we're supposed to be focused on, and make us just try to desperately deal with it, with the water, trying to stay afloat, trying to swim. The distractions make us focus on them instead of what we're supposed to be focused on, and we can get very overwhelmed very quickly, and that's the reality of life. We could break them down generally into two very general categories. Obviously, there are many, many subcategories and countless specific instances, but we could divide them very generally into two broad categories. The ones which come from above and the ones which come from below. Now, when we talk about this water as being distractions, I want to just make it clear, we're not talking about temptation to do things wrong. The temptation to do something wrong is not a distraction, it's wrong. A distraction doesn't have to be bad. A distraction just means it's taking our focus away from where it should be. Right? When a person's on a mission to achieve something and you have a very specific goal you want to achieve, it's very easy to get caught up in things that are productive and are going to contribute, but they're not productive enough and important enough to justify the time and the effort that they're taking from us. So is it productive? Yes. Is it contributing to the goal? Yes. But is it a distraction? Yes. If it's not as productive as the things we should be doing and it's not making the same contribution as the things we should be focusing on, it's distracting us from the things that we should be focusing on. So when we're going to just, to clarify again as we proceed, when we talk about distractions, we're not talking about things that we're doing wrong necessarily. It doesn't necessarily have to be things that are wrong. And there's going to be some nuance there and we'll get to it. But distractions, and again, so distractions can fall into two very broad categories. The ones that come from beneath, from the great depths, the water that comes from below and can drown us and overwhelm us. And when we talk about coming from below, we're talking about worldly distractions. Now, the last class I think we had was Hazin, and we talked there a little bit about how when we say heavens and earth many times, Shamayim and Oretz, right, the word Shamayim means the sky, like the physical sky that's outside. It also refers to, when a person says heavens, we say heavens. Heavens is already a little bit more vague. Heavens, when a person says heavens, it could mean to the sky. It could mean to spirituality, to that which is ethereal, divinity, that which is non-tangible. So heaven and earth can, in addition to meaning the ground and the sky, can also be, again, let's say metaphors for that which is material, that which is tangible, which would be the ground, the Oretz, and that which is non-tangible, that which is ethereal, that which is abstract, that which is even non-physical. Divinity, spirituality, godliness. So the distractions that come from below, the distractions that come from inside the ground, from worldliness, could be, today, I guess, really the number one example of this probably today, well, there could be several, but let's call the number one big one, would be pursuing livelihood, pursuing a career, pursuing income, which is a very important part of life. And this is why I wanted to qualify in the beginning before we get here. This is not to say that pursuing income and trying to support oneself and trying to support one's family, one's friends, whatever it is a bad thing. But it can be a distraction from something else that may be even more important. And again, it's very important here to just keep in mind, we're going to get to it, that nuance here is important. Because eating is extremely important. Feeding one's family is extremely important. But there are matters of degrees. And that's where things can get very blurry very quickly. So we have these waters, these distractions that can come from below. And just to keep it very simple, because it's not a simple idea, it's something that's going to be literally infinitely nuanced, and it's going to be different for every single individual, and for each individual it's going to be very different at different stages in life. Where do you draw the line between necessity and distraction? It's not a simple question. There's definitely no black or white answer, even for one individual, let alone for everyone. But generally speaking, it's not so hard to make that transition from doing what we really need to do to pay our rent and to feed ourselves and to feed our family and to take care of what we need. And then things can become very gray as we start to pursue a little more and a little more and a little more than we need, a little more than we need. And then it can get to a point where eventually it's more than we even could use if we wanted to. And that doesn't happen overnight. It can be a very slow, gradual process. So the pursuit of livelihood, this distraction that comes from below, it's worldly, it's part of the material world, trying to have food to get a place to sleep, trying to have food to get a place to get food to eat, etc., etc., etc. This is the archetypal example of the distraction that comes from below, the distraction of the world. And it can be very distracting. Now, again, just to clarify, because this is very, very important, I'd rather err on the side of over-clarifying this than under-clarifying, because it's such an important thing in life. And this is really, it's something that everybody pretty much is going to deal with or is dealing with at some point or other to some degree. It can be distracting even when we're dealing with our necessities and what we have to. And that can still be considered a distraction, and we're going to talk about how to address that, because obviously you don't say, well, don't bother trying to make enough money to pay your rent and feed yourself and feed your family because you need to study Torah and do mitzvahs all day. No one in their right mind is going to tell you that, and if they do tell you that, run. Find someone else to talk to. And so then here again, we could have a couple of directions that this can go. One direction this can go is when a person gets carried away with pursuing more than they need and pursuing more than that and more than that and more than that, and it becomes a very big distraction. And even when a person is pursuing basic needs, sometimes it's more distracting because a person's more desperate. When a person doesn't have what they need and they're pursuing their basic needs, it can become extremely distracting, certainly mentally and emotionally, because of that element of desperation that comes with it. The question then becomes, obviously Torah is not going to advocate that someone should let go of that pursuit of sustaining themselves and their family. But how do we make sure that that pursuit is not a distraction? And then on top of that, there's another whole category of distractions. There are niftuchu arubos hashamayim, the windows of the heavens open, and water came pouring down from above. We had this torrential rain, overwhelming rain that came from above. And above Shamayim, remember we said that Shamayim can mean literally the sky, which it means in the story. Rain came down from the sky, the physical sky where the clouds are, and rain came down. But the sky is also, or let's say heavens, also refers to that which is ethereal, less tangible, spiritual, divine. A person can be involved in noble pursuits. And again, I'm going to clarify because that probably wasn't the right choice of words, because supporting oneself and one's family is a noble pursuit. And it's, perhaps we could say, the most noble of all pursuits. But there are also, let's say, more spiritually inclined pursuits. A person who's trying to be a volunteer to help grow Torah study in their community, to help raise money for charities and to do good things, to help the community, to help people. These are activities that may well be very spiritually oriented and spiritually motivated. These are things that are coming from the direction of the heavens, of the sky. It's not a person trying to get a house or food or a nice car or a nice wardrobe. It's trying to help, trying to do the right thing. So how could doing the right thing possibly be a distraction from doing the right thing? And this is perhaps in some ways the more crucial lesson because it's less obvious. Doing what feels right and what seems to be right and what is a good thing isn't necessarily always the right thing to do in the moment. Right? If a person is, take the example of business, a person's in business and they have to generate some cash flow, make some sales in order to keep the business going, and instead of making the sales calls that they're supposed to be making this week, they focus on some other activity that the business needs, but is not what they need right now this week to make it until next week. Is what they're doing important for the business? Yeah. Is it business motivated? Yeah. Is it a distraction? Yeah. They're not going to make it till next week if they don't make those sales. So doing something that has the right motivation and is oriented in the right direction doesn't always necessarily mean that it's the right thing. It can be a distraction. There can be things which come from heaven, from above, from the sky, which are still distraction and are going to contribute to the flood that can overwhelm. So how do we know? Right? There are so many things that we need to do, so many things that we can do, and so many things that are positive and noble and spiritual and amazing, and we could never eat or sleep for the rest of our lives and be completely consumed with pursuing these things. So how do we know when it's right and when it's wrong? How do I know when I'm really being distracted and overwhelmed and neglecting the things that I'm supposed to be doing because I'm busy taking care of things which are spiritually oriented and spiritually motivated, but rather than reaching up into the clouds, I'm being drowned by the water that's coming down from them? How do I know? And this answer isn't going to solve everything because there are still going to be challenges left, and the biggest challenge in life is to figure things out. It's if we have 100% clarity in exactly what we're supposed to be doing, challenges can only be so hard. If you decide, you commit, and you just put your head down and go, it can only be as hard as it is. But when we have to figure out the balance and the nuance, that's where the real challenge is, and that's not going away. But we can get a degree of clarity which will clarify some of the most important basics and which will stop us from doing the things which are the biggest distractions and guaranteed to be rain coming down from the heavens rather than us moving up into them. And the marker for this is very simple. Are we doing what Torah expects us to do? If I'm doing a noble pursuit, I'm teaching someone, I'm organizing Torah study for someone, but because I'm organizing that Torah study, I didn't have time to put tefillin on that day, or I didn't have time to do my Torah study for myself that day that I'm obligated to do, then that means clearly what I was just caught up in, it wasn't me reaching to the heavens, it was rain coming down from them and flooding me and overwhelming me and distracting me. we have pretty clear, very clear guidelines about what we must do and what we're not allowed to do. Then on top of that, there's this whole infinite category of things that we should do, things that we can do. If the cans and shoulds are taking away from the musts and the can'ts, from the things that we have to do and the things that we're not allowed to do, then that is a black and white indicator of the fact that this is a distraction. It's not what we're supposed to be doing. I may be interacting with the sky, with the Shemaim. There may be an interaction between me and the sky. But where I think that I'm reaching into the sky, what's actually happening is that the sky is raining down on me and distracting me and drowning me. If it's taking away from me doing the things that I have to do, or it's leading me to do something that I'm not allowed to do. So that's number one benchmark. The number one indicator, yardstick. It's clear, it's black and white, there are no questions. If doing the things that I can do, that are noble and that are good to do, are stopping me from doing things that I have to do, or leading me to do things that I'm not allowed to do, that means that this activity or this pursuit is not me reaching up to the heavens, but me being rained down on from the heavens and being distracted and flooded and overwhelmed. Anything that causes me to do the wrong thing, either proactively by doing something I'm not allowed to do, or missing out on something that I'm obligated to do, that by definition means it was the wrong thing to do. If I have an opportunity to do a favor for someone, and I decide to do the favor, and because of that, I end up doing something that I wasn't allowed to do, or it causes me to miss out on something that I had to do, that means that that favor wasn't for me at that time and that place. Now, obviously, if that favor happens to have saved that person's life, if that favor is going to talk to someone who's, God forbid, on the brink of self-harm or whatever it is, someone who's unwell and needs emergency medical attention, etc., 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 then although I missed tefillin and although I didn't daven and although I did whatever broke Shabbos for it, those were the right things to do because Torah says that life comes first. So I just want to, again, that's fine print and clarification, but it's very important. Because when I say doing someone a favor, it doesn't mean saving someone's life. Because saving someone's life, saving someone from life-threatening circumstances is always number one. Now, the story of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was late to Shul on Yom Kippur because there was a lady who had just given birth and he went and she needed food and he went on Yom Kippur to chop wood, which you're not allowed to do, to light a fire, which you're not allowed to do, to cook food, which you're not allowed to do, to feed her because she needed the food and she would have died without it. So for the Alter Rebbe in Shul on Yom Kippur, it was better for him to be out there chopping wood and cooking rather than being in Shul. So when I say doing someone a favor, it doesn't mean saving someone's life because saving a life always comes first. But when I'm doing someone a favor that will be helpful for them, but not crucial, doing a favor is a nice thing and it's a big mitzvah. Avas Yisroel, treating someone else the way that we'd like to be treated, is, in the words of Hillel HaZokim, the entire Torah and everything else is commentary. But if I'm doing someone a favor that's unnecessary, that's not crucial, and it stops me from doing something that I needed to do or results in me doing something that I wasn't allowed to do, that means that it wasn't the time and the place for that favor. And again, some more fine print. So what if that happens? And I do something because it seems like the right thing, and then I realize I messed up and it wasn't the time and place? I'll try to do better next time. Right, this is a lesson of Yom Kippur in a way. Like, we don't need to be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. We're here to make mistakes and to learn. That's a big part of our job here too. The idea is to learn and to try to do better next time. Now, if we want to learn and to be able to do better, we have to know what the benchmarks are. What's the yardstick of whether or not that was the right thing to do? Anytime I invest effort in something and it leads me to do the wrong thing, that means that that was the wrong investment of effort. So this is a way to have clarity in what is a noble pursuit, and this works for both categories. Whether it's a pursuit that's coming from the ground, or whether it's a pursuit that's ground, that's worldly oriented, or a pursuit that's heavenly oriented. If the pursuit leads me to do the wrong thing, leads me to go against the guidelines of Torah, then that means that pursuit was wrong. It was the wrong investment of energy. And I'll try to make sure I don't make that mistake again. So, one big issue here is that that's easier said than done. It's like, okay, so now I know what's right and wrong, but you know what? I have to go to work. I have to support my family. I have to support myself. I have to be involved in the community. Now, it's easy to say, okay, so now you know what's right and what's wrong. Okay, I know. But the bottom line is that the reality of life is that when you're involved in things, you know, it's not like, it's not necessarily that simple to have clarity every moment of every day, and every time you're going to move or do something, it's like, okay, right or wrong, yes. Okay, next step, right or wrong, yes. It's like you do something, you know it's right, go a little further, you get pulled in a little deeper, you're moving quickly, everything's in a rush. And before you know it, you've slipped and it's like, oh, how did I end up here? Now I've been pursuing something that was noble, but ended up in the wrong place. That can happen very easily. Right? And that's a much more likely scenario. I would suggest that that's likely a much more likely scenario for the vast majority of people, to say the least, rather than having clarity at every moment in time, and for it to be simple to just be able to have that clarity every moment, right, wrong, is it right, is it wrong? If we spend every second of the day thinking about whether it's right or wrong in between the other seconds when we're actually doing something, not going to get very far in life. It's aside from the fact that it's probably pretty much impossible to keep track like that. So what do we do? Let's look back to the story. If this story of the flood is a metaphor for the problem, it's also going to include the metaphor for the solution. What was the problem in the story? A flood. Water. Water that was too much for people to survive in. Distractions that are too much to survive. What's the solution? What did Hashem say to Noach? Boi el ha-teva. Come into the ark. The word teva in Hebrew means ark. Can this get erased? The word teva means ark, which is what it means literally in the story. Noach built an ark, a boat. It also means, anyone else know what else it means? Word. Yo. Teva means word. Hashem said to Noach, come into the word. You want to be saved? You want to be saved from the water, from the flood? Come into the ark. You want to be saved from these distractions that are coming from below and they're coming from above? Come into the word. The words of prayer, the words of Torah. The words of prayer and of Torah, really, again, we could divide the effect, the protective effect and the reason that they're a solution into a couple of different broad categories. One of the reasons that the Torah and Tefillah are protective, and in some ways it's perhaps the more important one, but as far as the focus of this discussion is, it's the less relevant one, is that Torah and Tefillah are holy, they're sacred, they contain God within them. And when we surround ourselves, when we are involved with these words, we're connecting to the creator of the universe and the creator of those distractions, which is going to keep us more strongly connected, which means by definition, we're going to be better predisposed to surviving and staying on track. In addition to that, the most important thing in life in facing challenges, and I've said this a number of times, perhaps, arguably, certainly one of the most important factors is perspective. And this can be important from a number of different angles. It's important as far as anger and frustration and anxiety are concerned. And it's important as far as distraction is concerned. The more consciously aware we are of the bigger picture, the more secure we're going to be and the less likely we're going to be distracted. So what do I mean, the more consciously aware we are of the bigger picture? So there's an expression, I'm going to ask where it's from and expect that if any, I shouldn't say that. There's an expression that says, Ezehu chacham, who is a wise person, haroya es hanolad, one who sees, literally one who sees that which is born, which generally means one who sees that which is to come. One who, before doing something, thinks about what will be born from my actions, what's going to happen, what's going to be the outcome of what I'm doing, and make a smart decision. Where? Right. That's the suggestion that everyone always makes. It's wrong. That's why I asked. It was a trick question. I made the same suggestion, and I was wrong for the same reason. It sounds exactly like it belongs in Pirkei Avos. It actually comes from Gemara Tamid. It says in Pirkei Avos, Ezehu chacham halomin mikol adam, who is wise, one who learns from everyone. And this sounds, it's half in Pirkei Avos, and it sounds like it belongs in Pirkei Avos, but it doesn't actually come from there. That's when you notice I was going to say something before and I stopped. I was going to say, and if anyone tries to make a suggestion, you're probably going to be wrong, and then I didn't say it because then no one would bother making a suggestion. So this seems like it belongs in Pirkei Avos. It's very Pirkei Avos-like, but it comes from Gemara Tamid. Who is wise? One who sees that which is born. Now, like I said, what that generally is understood to mean is one who sees that which will be born, number one, from their actions and their decisions, and generally that which is to come. Don't just think about today. Think about that which will be born. Think about that which is coming in the future. Plan ahead. It's a wise thing to do. It's wise to plan ahead, and it's wise to think about the outcomes of your actions before you make a decision. The Baal Shem Tov explains something else that this teaches us. Ezehu chacham, who is wise? Haroya es hanolad, one who sees that which is born. What does that mean? I'm going to give an example that anyone who's been in this class for a while will have heard before. I don't know whether I've done it this year or not. But if someone was writing a novel and they were describing, I see some smiles, people already know what's coming. If someone was writing a novel and describing the scene in this room, and there were some tables, and there was a camera in the middle of the table, and there were people sitting around listening, and there was this guy at the front of the room who couldn't stop talking. And in front of the guy at the front of the room, there was a marker that was about 3 feet above the table. Is that true? It's true. If you read that, would you have an accurate picture of what's happening here? No. If the author would write, and in front of the guy at the front of the room, there was a marker that was 3 feet above the table because he was holding it there, that would be the full truth. If they just said there was a marker that was in front of him 3 feet above the table, what you would likely imagine is that there was a marker hovering 3 feet above the table, which there isn't. If I'm not holding it, it's not there. So, when we look around the world, I see a table, I see a marker, I see a tzedakah box, I see a camera. We see food, we see houses, we see money, we see work. These are important parts of life. There's an expression, nishtoken welt, there's no world. It's a Hasidic expression. The question is, what does that mean? It's very, very important to have that context. There was a story of a Chassid who once, of a person, let's call him, who borrowed some money and didn't want to pay it back. And when he was brought in front of, I believe it was the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, and he said, well, why aren't you paying back the loan? He said, nishtoken welt, there's no world. It's not real money, it's all imaginary, it's all fantasy. he made sure to give instructions to make sure that the guy would understand very quickly that he's very aware of the realness of the world. Let's put it that way. And I don't think it took him very long to give the money back once those directions were given. When we say Nishtaken Welt, we don't mean the world doesn't exist. What we mean is, if we had an accurate perspective of the full picture, there isn't just a marker in front of me, there's a marker in front of me because I'm holding it there. There aren't just trees outside, there are trees outside because there's a creator who's making them exist. And the sap that's flowing throughout the tree that's carrying the nutrients and circulating the nutrients and circulating the waste products and bringing things from the soil and taking other things to the soil. All of that's happening because the Creator is making it happen. My diaphragm's moving up and down so that I can breathe, so that there's oxygen going into my blood, which is being circulated because my heart's pumping, which is bringing oxygen to all the billions and trillions of cells in my body, each of which has thousands of chemical reactions happening at any given moment in time. All of that is happening because there is a creator who is consciously and intentionally making it happen at every moment in time. So, are these things happening? Yes. Is there a world? Yes. Does each one of us exist? Yes. When we say Nishtaken Welt, there's no world, it doesn't mean that the world doesn't exist. It means that if I had a real conscious awareness of the full picture, and when I looked at a tree, I saw something that was existing because the Creator was making it exist intentionally for a specific purpose. And when I got up in the morning and became aware of my existence, I was aware of the fact that I exist because the Creator is making me exist intentionally for a specific purpose, etc., etc., etc. I would see not just the tree, but I would see that which the tree is born from. I would see the source that the tree is being made to exist by. Haroya es hanoilad. I look at the tree and I see the tree, and I see the tree as something that's being born from this divine creative force that's making it exist. And I see that when I look at myself, I see it when I look at other people, I see it when I look at objects, I see it when I think of the universe. I see it when I think of angels, I see it when I think of cars. I see Haroya es hanoilad, I see that which is born, and I have a conscious awareness of where it's coming from. That changes everything. If I wake up in the morning and the first thing I say is Moida ani lefonecha melech chai v'kayam, I acknowledge and thank you, King, Creator, Shechazato binishmasi, that you gave me back my soul and made me live today again in the world for a purpose, to contribute something that everyone else on the face of planet Earth combined couldn't contribute without me. And that every single thing that I am going to encounter, every object, every individual, every experience, every event, every incident, is all noilad. It's born from a divine creative force that's making it exist for a specific reason. That is going to change everything. When I approach a situation and my general outlook on the world, my general perspective is a conscious awareness of hanoilad, the fact that everything is born, everything exists as a result of a divine creative force that's making it exist intentionally and for a reason. And that's what I see when I look at things. Roya es hanoilad, I see that which is born, and where it's... Is that me? And where it's born from... Sorry, make sure that doesn't happen again. And where it's born from, chacham, I'll be wise. And when I encounter a situation, I'm not going to have to necessarily stop and think, okay, right, wrong, am I going to be overwhelmed? Am I not going to be overwhelmed? What should I do? What shouldn't I do? If I have cultivated this general outlook that's consciously aware of purpose and where things come from and why, I'm going to be much, much more strongly predisposed to making the right decision. And this is why Hashem says to Noach, Boi el hateva, come into the teva, come into the word. Before you go out into the world, before the flood comes, before you meet the onslaught of rain from below, of water from below and from above, these distractions, both mundane and spiritually oriented and motivated, come into the Word. Start your day with Moida Ani L'fanecha. Acknowledge that you're here for a reason because Hashem put you here for a reason. After Moida Ani, we say brachas. We thank Hashem for the most basic things that we have in life, for our clothes, for our vision, etc., etc. There's a story in the Zohar of Rabbi Yosef Saba, maybe? Let me have a look. Rabbi Yosef Saba, who would sit down to eat, and before he would partake of the food, he would pray to God to give him food. It's like, mate, it's in front of you on the plate. You can make a bracha, you can say thank you Hashem for the food, but why are you requesting food if it's there? And this comes back to what we were talking about before, but it actually takes it a step further. Because we already talked about Roya Es HaNoled, seeing that which is born. It doesn't just mean seeing that which was born. I was created, the trees were created, and now they continue to exist. They were created for a purpose, etc., etc. Just think about how deep we can go, how much time we have. So there's an expression in, let's call it Jewish philosophy. And when I say Jewish philosophy, I don't mean philosophy by people who happen to be Jewish. I mean Torah Jewish philosophy. There's an expression, I believe it comes from the Abarbanel, Mechuyev HaMetzias. Metzias means something which exists. Mechuyev means obligatory. If I am mechuyev to do something, it means I'm obligated to do it. Putting on tefillin every day. I'm mechuyev to put on tefillin 6 days a week. Mechuyev HaMetzias means something which is obligated to exist. Means something which by definition of its nature, it needs to exist. This table doesn't need to exist by definition. Simple proof is it didn't always exist. Someone made it. The wood that it's made from also didn't need to exist because before that tree grew, the wood didn't exist. But what about the molecules that it's made from? Before the tree grew, the molecules, some of them were in the ground. The carbon was in the ground, and the water was perhaps partly in the ground and partly in the air. And the nitrogen was in the air, etc. Everything that this table is made from already existed before the table existed and existed before the tree grew. It was just in a different form somewhere. So does that mean that the molecules need to exist? And the answer is no. Because if we believe that 5,779 years ago, the Creator created the world, and before the Creator created the world didn't exist, and there were no molecules of any type, there were no subatomic particles, there were no electrons, protons, neutrons, there were no quarks, there was no mass and there was no energy. That means mass and energy and atoms and molecules don't need to exist by definition of their nature. They need to exist now because the Creator created a universe, and the rules of thermodynamics state that once something exists, it can't disappear. In a closed system, mass and energy can't be created or lost. So once it exists, it can't just disappear, it has to continue existing. But the nature of mass doesn't mean that by definition it needs to exist. Once it exists, it has nowhere to go. But it doesn't need to exist by definition. There's only one thing that's mechuyev hametzias. There's only one thing which by definition of its nature needs to exist. And for it to not exist is conceptually impossible. And that's the Creator. God, Hashem, whatever we want to refer to it as. Now, it's not something that we can easily or perhaps even at all really wrap our heads around because it's something that doesn't exist in the universe that we know of. It's not something that exists inside the reality that we were designed to experience, so we're not designed to understand it or relate to it. But the nature of the Creator is such that the Creator needs to exist by definition. It's not possible for there to ever have been a point in time or a place where the Creator doesn't exist. The Creator is mechuyev hametzias. The nature of the Creator means that the Creator must always exist. Everywhere and every when. The Creator created time and space. Everything other than the Creator doesn't naturally exist. The most natural state of existence, which is the way things were going back before creation, was just the creator and nothing else. This omnipotent, infinite, undefinable entity. And that entity then decided that it was time for there to be a universe, so there could be challenge and progress, etc. Now, going back to this, using this analogy for something else, well, it's not really something else, but it's a different aspect of it. Why is it that when I let go of the marker, it drops, it falls down? Because the natural state of any physical object on planet Earth is to be drawn downwards. That's the rules of gravity. It's drawn down towards the ground. If I want it to exist in a state that's not natural, if I don't want this to be on the ground, something has to be, there has to be a force that's holding it up. It may be on the desk, and the normal force that the desk is exerting on the marker means it's not going down to the floor. And if it was on the floor would be the reason that it's not on the ground underneath. And when I'm holding it now, the reason it's not falling down to the desk is because the muscles in my body, etc., are exerting a force that's holding it up and not allowing it to fall. But it's unnatural. So the second that force disappears, it's going to go to its most natural state at that point in time, which is to go down. If the natural state of everything is a lack of existence, the creator and nothing else, and the creator says, I have an interest in there being an unnatural state of affairs, I want there to be a universe which doesn't naturally exist and naturally should not exist, because the only thing that exists naturally by definition is the creator, then the creator says, I'm going to make this exist and I'm going to keep it in existence as long as I need it to be there, which is eternity. Because if I stop making it exist, it's not going to exist anymore because it naturally doesn't exist. So as soon as I stop exerting that force, keeping it in an unnatural state, it will return to that natural state. The only way the universe can exist is if I continue to make it exist. Now, if a person can get to the point where they see the world that way, haroya es hanoilad, not just seeing that which was born, seeing that which is being born, and if we look around and have a conscious awareness of the fact that everything is constantly being created again at every instant in time by the creator intentionally for a reason, now it makes sense. Yes, Rabbi Yisroel Saba sat down to the table, and yes, there was a plate of food in front of him, but that plate of food was being recreated by the creator every single instant. And the creator wouldn't, if God would decide that he shouldn't have that meal now, it's not like God would need to send a fireball to burn it up or whatever. All he had to do is stop actively making it exist and it just wouldn't be there anymore because it naturally shouldn't exist, just like everything else. So he was praying, despite the fact that the food was in front of him, he knew that every moment in time is its own entity and needs to be created independently. So he was praying, please give me food to eat. Please make this scene continue the way that it's going so that I will have food to eat. Because I know and I'm consciously aware of the fact that you need to put this food in front of me again every single instant. Because naturally nothing exists. So in the morning we wake up and we thank God for the basic essentials. For clothes, for things that we mostly, hopefully, take for granted. But shouldn't. We shouldn't, number one, because it's not that simple. Not everybody in the world, even today, unfortunately, is as lucky to have the things that we take for granted as we are to have them. And secondly, even if, and thankfully the world is moving in that direction very quickly, and real poverty is being reduced at a rate faster than anyone expected even 10, 15 years ago, thank God. Even once we get to that point, hopefully soon, very soon, when real abject poverty is eradicated, it's still not something that we should take for granted. Why? Because everything that we have is recreated at every moment in time. Everything that we have only exists at any moment in time because the Creator's making it exist. That's why we thank God for things that we could naturally take for granted, that it would be understandable and natural to take for granted. We still thank God for them and pray for them every single day, day in, day out. And we start our day by saying, number one, Moida ani lofanecha, I thank and acknowledge you, Creator, for giving me my life. I start off the day, Boy ala tevo, come into these words, set the foundation and the perspective and the life view for the day. Number one, by acknowledging that my existence comes from God. Acknowledging that everything around me, everything in the universe only exists because the Creator is making it exist at every moment in time intentionally for a reason. And I go through and I say my prayers and I start off the day with some Torah study. Then when I head out into the world, it's going to be much, and it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Life is never going to be easy. Until Mashiach comes, and may it be immediately. Life is challenges. That's what it's about. The pre-Mashiach era is about challenges and overcoming those challenges, facing challenges, growing, achieving. So it's not going to be easy, but it levels the playing field a lot. There's a big difference between trying to stay on track when we are overwhelmed even just by what we see, as opposed to if we step out in the world and we have a very clear conscious awareness of why things exist and the fact that they exist for a purpose and every moment in time they're being made to exist again for a purpose. The playing field has been leveled significantly, and it's going to be much easier to stay much closer on target. Challenges are going to be there. And sometimes as we grow, the reality is that sometimes the challenges get harder in some ways, but they get deeper. They get higher up. So, if someone's learning to fight, if someone practices martial arts and they've been working for a few years and really, really advanced, and now they have to go up and compete against the world champion for a title, it's going to be the most difficult fight they've ever had in their life. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that things have gotten harder. It's just that now they're in a position to tackle things that a couple of years ago weren't even part of reality for them, because the things that used to be difficult became easy. The things that they used to have to struggle for have now become second nature, and now they're fighting bigger and better battles. So it doesn't mean that life's going to get easy, but it means we're going to be more on point and fighting bigger and better battles. So life's not going to get easy. I just want to, again, some fine print. Don't think that this means once we get there, it's all over and it's going to be, a piece of cake. It's not happening. But it also becomes much more deeply rewarding. It's much more satisfying, even if you lose, to have lost to the world champion at any discipline, than to have beaten someone who just started today the same way that I did. Yeah, I beat someone who's just as incompetent as I am, or ignorant as I am. Whoop-de-doo. Wow, I just lost to the world champion, but I actually got to challenge him. I may have lost, but it's a more satisfying experience than beating someone that was zero challenge. So as we progress and get better at having this conscious awareness, the things that used to be challenging and the things that used to be real distractions or real risk of distracting us are not at risk of distracting us anymore. And you know what? New things are going to come along. And they're going to be more subtle and more nuanced. And they will be effective at distracting us until we get better and get able to get a sufficient conscious awareness and grounding to not be distracted by them. And then something else will come along and something else will come along. But, so on one hand, don't expect everything to just go away and get easy. But at the same time, that's real progress. And the things that are challenging and distracting us today, we can get past them if we put in the effort and invest in training our awareness and our outlook to be consciously aware of the fact that yes, Hareya Esa Nolad, things are born from somewhere, constantly at every moment in time for a reason. I'm in this room right now. Every single thing that exists in this room and every single thing that's happening in this room is happening for a reason, because the Creator's making it happen for a reason right now. If that's what I see when I look around the room, the things that would have distracted me without that perspective may not even enter the horizon. I may not even notice them anymore, because I'm going to look at things and see things so differently. So this is what Hashem said, Boi el teva, come into the teva, come into the word. You want to protect yourself from these distractions from the waters from below and the ones from above. Come into the words. Ground yourself in this conscious awareness of where things come from constantly and why, and the things that were distracting you some of them will probably cease to be distracting at all, and the other ones you'll be much better equipped to deal with them. And the new ones will come along. Very important to keep in mind that when Hashem told Noach to go into the ark, he didn't just say go into the ark. He said go into the ark and take your family. It's not just about me. See, on one hand, we say that a person is supposed to look at themselves and look at the world and say, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, for me. The world was created for me. All the things that exist in the universe, and I'd love to get into a detailed description of just a few things like I did earlier, just for the sake of perhaps partly being dramatic and to emphasize it a little more, but we don't have time. Everything that exists in the universe, and it's just, you think about it for 10 seconds, it's completely mind-blowing what's actually happening around us. You look outside and you see a quiet street. But think about the fact that every single one of those leaves has an entire universe happening inside of it just for it to be alive. Let alone a whole tree, let alone all the trees, let alone the people and everything else. All of this happens bishvili, because of me. Now, that doesn't mean, that's not supposed to give me a sense of entitlement. It's supposed to give me a sense of responsibility. All of this was created in order to facilitate my opportunity to do the right thing in the face of challenge. The Creator created the whole universe to give me the opportunity to face this challenge so that I'd have the opportunity to do the right thing, which is very empowering. At the same time, God, the Eibishter, the Creator, created everything that exists. And the same way He created it all for me, He created it all for each of you as well. When I'm going into that ark, when I'm going into those words, if I have a healthy perspective, once I've entered the words a little and I have this awareness of the fact that everything exists for a reason, I should be aware of the fact that everyone exists for a reason, and therefore when I enter into those words, I should want to take others with me. I should want to say the Creator wants us to succeed. The Creator wants me to succeed in the face of these distractions, and He wants you to succeed in the face of these distractions as well, and everyone else. So when I enter these words, when I work on deepening my perspective and giving myself a stronger conscious awareness of the big picture of everything and where it comes from, where it's coming from every moment and why, I should want to give that to others as well so that we can all do better in the face of the flood, in the face of these distractions. Because if I know the purpose for which I'm here, I know that everyone else is here for the same purpose as well. And if I care about that purpose, everyone's equally important. Everyone's equally a part of it. That's why Hashem said to Noach, you want to protect yourself from the flood? Go into the ark. You want to protect yourself from distractions? Go into the word and take others with you. It's not just about me. It's about us. So just to summarize super quickly, distractions can come from below, they can also come from above. The key to know whether something is positive, whether it's the right thing to be focusing on, or it's a distraction, is what's the outcome? Is it leading me to do something I shouldn't do, or stopping me from doing something that I have to do? Then it was a distraction. If not, it may have been a good thing. How do I protect myself from distractions? Coming into the word, starting off the day, Moda ani lefonecha, acknowledging where I come from, why I'm here. Haroya es hanolad, seeing that which is born, having a conscious awareness of where things come from. And the fact that they're coming from there every instant. Everything is coming from there every instant. For a reason, intentionally, deliberately. Entering into these words, deepening our conscious awareness of this, and bringing others along with us, means that we will be better predisposed to overcoming these challenges and these distractions, as will others. And we will all move leaps and bounds closer to the purpose for which we're here, which is to make the world divine, to bring the Creator into the world, to make a dir b'tachtonim, and to bring Mashiach. Have a good week, everyone.